Hello and welcome to this high-level overview of aPTitude and ProCert. We think that by having an understanding of the aPTitude system and the ProCert program will help prepare you for your role as a ProCert reviewer. So first, let's start with aPTitude and introduce you to the system. aPTitude is the free online system that the Federation developed for purposes of sharing continuing competence information. The users of the system are PT and PTA licensees, the providers of continuing competence activities, who we call vendors, and finally, the jurisdiction boards, the licensure boards, use aPTitude. aPTitude is a comprehensive system that focuses on compliance and public protection. So while there are other online tracking systems and apps and so forth that individuals can use to record what they have completed, aPTitude is a very smart system. So it enables tracking and completion of activities by category, and also it provides the board in that state the access to review everything that the licensee has recorded. Recently, we've added students as aPTitude users. So here's exactly how licensees use the system. They can create their account and record a license, and from that point verify what are the requirements for that state, for that license. What must I complete? What may I complete? They can also look for activities to complete, future conferences, future courses, and so forth. Obviously, maintaining a record of everything that they've completed by recording it, storing their documentation, their certificates or letters of completion. The system will also tell them in advance, your license renewal date is coming up, your continuing competence deadline is approaching. And licensees can use this for any number of licenses. So this is a great way to manage information when the requirements and the deadlines are very different from state to state. The vendors are using the system to, again, verify what do jurisdictions require, what do they allow licensees to complete, and so is what I offer eligible for credit, for continuing competence credit in a particular state. The mere act of publishing their activities is a way to market what they offer to any licensee using the system. So they can provide a lot of detail about all of their courses and activities. They can receive feedback in the form of rating from the licensees that complete a course. So for instance, a licensee may say, I found this to be a 5-star course, or, I really only want to rate this 3 stars because I feel that it fell short of my expectations. And of course, vendors are using the system, ProCert being the program that's utilized in the aPTitude system to evaluate activities. This is the section of the system where they are receiving certification for eligible activities, those activities that are meeting our ProCert standards. And then finally, the boards, as I said, they're able to verify and audit what licensees have completed. It's also another way for boards to inform licensees, here's what you need to complete and by when. So we really promote the system to the licensure boards as an effective auditing tool. So for licensees to get started, they just need to have a few pieces of information to provide to us: name, email address, and license number. We ask the licensee to tell us essentially, when did you get licensed, when is your continuing competence due, and that's all they need to create their account. So all of this functionality is free. So we really want you to appreciate what the system has to offer to all of these different user types. But we're going to focus on ProCert today because that is the program that you are about to become intimately familiar with as a volunteer reviewer. So ProCert is our method of evaluating activities against a well-articulated and very comprehensive set of standards, the FSBPT standards for continuing competence. We want you to know that the standards were not arrived at in sort of a haphazard fashion. We researched the literature on continuing competence. Our continuing competence committee drafted them. We sent them out for stakeholder feedback. We received a lot of feedback. I think a few thousand PTs, PTAs had opportunity to weigh in on them. The full language, of course, is available in the guidance document, but we also publish the standards at continuingcompetence.org. And they are the foundation, they are the basis upon which ProCert evaluates activities. And value is awarded in the form of continuing competence units. And we're going to talk about this in more detail shortly. So here are the short titles of the standards, and this alone is intended to really convey the comprehensive fashion that the standards were developed through. So a set of required standards that every activity needs to meet, beginning with tell us how the administration of the activity is designed. We look at the content and the content breakdown very closely. Obviously, we look at things like the instructor and developer qualifications, what information does the vendor share about the activity with prospective learners. And then we have sort of the hybrid standards, the engagement, EBP, and behavioral objectives. So within those standards, there are certain elements, certain criteria that must be met, but then there are opportunities for vendors to achieve extra credit or value-added credit within those particular standards. This will obviously become much more clear as you complete your training. And then finally, the value-added section of the standards at the bottom of the slide, purely extra credit or value-added opportunities when the activity is designed especially well to meet the objectives and the vendor can justify that. If there's an assessment component, pre or post-test, extra credit can be awarded, and most activities have an evaluation component, so there's a fairly easy way for that value-added credit to be awarded and enhance the CCU award. And again, continuingcompetence.org, that's where you can click through to read all the language about the standards. So really what we're talking about with ProCert is a very different approach. If some of you have performed reviews for other organizations, other entities, we really want you to know that we really come at this in a very different way. We're shifting away from awarding value to an activity based entirely or solely on that activity's duration. So it's often described in terms of seat time. If you are occupying a seat for 6 hours, most other evaluators will decide that the value of that activity is six contact hours, 6 hours, and so forth. However, in doing so, there's really no way to distinguish a particularly high quality activity versus an activity where there's a low level of engagement, a more passive learning experience. So two courses may be of the same duration, or two activities may be of the same duration, but we want to be able to distinguish between the two using more than just duration. So we look at this from a variety of using a variety of factors. Those include, what is the demand on the learner? What is the learner expected to do? What is the degree to which the learner is engaged both in the content and the activity itself and with the other professionals who are participating in that activity? How well does the activity adhere to evidence-based practice? Duration, of course, must be a factor in this evaluation, but it isn't the sole factor. And then we look at many other considerations as well. So this is really a simple explanation of what is a really complex formula to arrive at an activity's value. So in general, when an activity complies with more standards or better complies with the standards in the form of meeting more criteria associated with the standards, it's going to receive a higher award. So this can be illustrated with this example of an 11-hour course. This is a weekend course, full day plus half day over a weekend. This course incorporates a laboratory experience, perhaps more than one, some role playing, case presentations by the learners, and all learners must complete a post-test to achieve credit. This is the kind of course that could earn 12 or maybe even 13 CCUs. To contrast that with an activity that complies with fewer standards or a lower degree of compliance with the standards by meeting fewer criteria under the standards, this activity would receive a lower value. So reasonably, a 3-hour course that's simply delivered by by viewing a DVD, that's the kind of course that we would expect to achieve only 2 CCUs. So that's where that distinguishing approach really is best illustrated. So just a little bit of an overview about the reviewers, and you can count yourself among this group that is extraordinary and really powers this program for us. We are able to select talent from across the nation. So we're not limited to just the reviewers or the volunteers within a specific state or jurisdiction. So our core of volunteers, of reviewers, consists of folks who are in education, people who would consider themselves primarily or even exclusively clinicians. We have many from a regulatory background. Maybe they've served on a regulatory board or are currently serving on a board or worked for a board. So they understand that regulatory mindset that FSBPT is all about. So in this process, we have a range of subject matter experts, specializations, and it really does, that diversity is really valuable to our entire program. We require, of course, the initial training, and then ongoing training usually comes in the form of we share ongoing guidance and information with the reviewers via email and other mechanisms. Also, we have training modules that we record from time to time to view. And so we incorporate and assimilate a lot of quality assurance kind of approaches and strategies. And the goal is to arrive at consistent and accurate determinations in the process. So we really do believe in this approach of lots of support and lots of guidance for our reviewers. This isn't information that you necessarily will ever find yourself representing to anyone, but just so you are informed, ProCert offers the activity vendors many choices to request for their course, and some make sense for some vendors and other vendors gravitate toward different choices. So we offer both 1 and 2 year terms for the activity to be certified. With every activity or with every submission, if it fails on the first submission, the vendor is allowed to edit it and resubmit it and not incur a fee or an expense in the process. So a free redo is one of our most valuable program features. And then, of course, if an activity has completed its 1 or 2 year certification term, it's eligible to be recertified. And so below, the chart illustrates the different fee options that a vendor may choose for both single activity, and then we have 3 subscription options depending on sort of the volume or the length of the vendor's course catalog. So this way we are able to provide a choice that really meets all different vendors' varied needs. So the ProCert submission process, the review process, and the CCU award process, that functions entirely within the aPTitude system. So when a course or a conference is certified, it's going to carry a ProCert certified label, and that's a very valuable tool to educate licensees. So if I'm a licensee in a state that accepts ProCert and I search for a course on any particular topic, what I'm going to instantly see is there could be a number of courses that are ProCert certified. So instantly that indicates to the prospective student, this course has some value to me, both in terms of having been evaluated in a very comprehensive fashion, having met a rigorous set of standards, and also it's going to help me meet my requirements for continuing competence and my license in that state. So here's a really simplified overview of the review process. We're going to break this down into a more detailed flow process for you at the training, but just in terms of how this works in general, an activity is submitted to the system and it's assigned to 2 initial reviewers. Those 2 reviewers conduct that review independent of one another. So when you receive an assignment, you have no idea who that activity has been assigned to for purposes of initial review. It could be, someone in your state. It could be someone in another state. You never know that other person's identity. But you complete your review, and the system, once it's received, once you've completed it, the system then is ready to assign it to a final reviewer. These are reviewers who have had quite a bit of practice with us and have gone through additional training to be that final review, to look at what both the initial reviewers had determined, and in some cases there could be disagreement that needs to be reconciled. In many cases they're arriving at the same conclusion, and the final reviewer is affirming that. Then it comes back to the staff. Our senior staff reviewer ensures that all of the comments are complete, thorough, clear, and so forth, and then we send it back to the vendor. If it's certified, the vendor accepts it. If it was rejected for certification, the vendor reviews where the deficiencies were indicated in the review and edits the activity accordingly to resubmit back to us. So again, once it's certified, it appears in the aPTitude system with the ProCert logo. So we encourage states to accept ProCert because, again, the comprehensive requirements, those very clearly articulated standards, the 14 standards. We also provide assurance that our reviewers are well trained, entirely prepared to approach each and every review with an eye toward consistency and applying the guidance that they were supplied with and trained to. The staff support that we provide to the vendors and reviewers, we think that has some distinct value. Obviously, there are activity vendors because they operate in multiple states. They have been long advocating for this single source of approval that ProCert is increasingly offering. And also, as licensees practice in more than one state, their perspective is it only makes sense if there's consistency. For example, if I'm in Indiana and I know that ProCert is accepted there, but I'm also licensed and practice from time to time in Ohio, I would like to see Ohio also accepting ProCert. That isn't the case today, but of course we're advocating for that consistency to grow. And then finally, the most compelling reason is the public protection piece. Because the standards are derived from the literature that does exist on the topic of continuing competence, we feel that our approach really represents a closer linkage to public protection than other evaluators. And finally, here's what we want you to know just today about where we stand with ProCert acceptance. We do have a majority of states currently accepting ProCert, so that's very encouraging. Just in the 4.5 years, almost 5 years, I guess, that ProCert has been in existence, we've seen a really great adoption rate. We do have a number of states that still have no continuing competence requirement whatsoever. We have a few states where the Board of Physical Therapy is still holding on to that responsibility and isn't quite ready to turn that over to another evaluator. A few states are using other evaluators at this time, and so we're hoping that eventually they see the value in allowing ProCert to evaluate activities for their licensees. And then finally, we still have a few states as well that they simply haven't decided that there is any value in having courses evaluated at all. So it's essentially, if the course or the conference in any fashion addresses physical therapy, it's a qualifying course. And so we'd like to see that mindset shift over time as well. So that concludes the presentation, and hopefully this leaves you with a sense of I can appreciate what the aPTitude system encompasses and what I will be contributing to the program of ProCert that the Federation is so highly vested in and committed to. Thank you for your attention, and hope you enjoy the other training modules.